Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Friday, Erev Shabbos. Let's light up the darkness. Wonderful day, making a Siyum on Tractate Sanhedrin. I should have written that in the description of today's class, but we are indeed making a Siyum, completing our journey through Tractate Sanhedrin, the 24th volume of the Talmud. What a wonderful day. Who's in the house? Yehud in South Carolina, Renee in Indiana, Guy in Ohio, Gordo in Scotland, Bella in Florida, Melissa in Great Neck, Joe in the Inland Empire, Belle in Texas, Lucy Ulin in Georgia. Welcome, Lucy. I think that's a new name. Chaim in Florida, Elle in Southern California, Alan in New York City. Welcome, everybody. Have a l'chaim handy to make a something to make a l'chaim when we make the siyum, when we complete this tractate, and then we'll open just the first lines of tractate Makos, or some would say Makot, the next tractate, the 25th volume of the Talmud. That is quite a short tractate. I think it's 23 pages. And in many ways, a continuation of Sanhedrin, right? This is all about, courts that meet and pass judgment on people, right? Sanhedrin, the court of judges. So we talked a lot about death penalty cases, how many judges are necessary, other kinds of courts, how many judges are necessary. This final chapter was about who has a place in Olam Haba. And then makot, or makos, is lashes. That's what it means, lashes. So it is about court-ordered punishments, whether they be lashes or exile. And the first chapter is actually about conspiring witnesses. I do want to start catching up. We are, a couple weeks behind the Daf Yomi schedule. But, makos actually is really fascinating. And really an extension of Sanhedrin. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll definitely get double pages where we can. But there's so much of that material that is fascinating, particularly the court-ordered punishment of exile. That is the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, of particular interest to us because we're working on a project that involves the city of refuge. So we won't rush through that. That's chapter 2 of the next tractate. At any rate, today we get to finish, with God's help, Tractate Sanhedrin. We are on right at the top of page 112b, and 113 is quite a short page. The 113b is very short. Okay, so we've been talking here about the idolatrous city. So this would be, when the children of Israel have sovereignty in the Holy Land, and there's a Jewish city, and more than half of the residents are subverted to idolatry, not just find it on their own, but they are incited to commit idolatry by at least 2 adult men, who then get the majority of the inhabitants of the city to become idolaters. And in each and every case, there was 2 witnesses to the incitement and warning that, hey, if you go commit idolatry, you'll be subject to the death penalty. And yet they kept doing it over and over and over again. So this is one of those laws that probably never happened in Jewish history. But if, with warning from 2 witnesses, it happened over and over and over again, more than half the residents of the city committed idolatry, then not only would all the wicked be subject to the death penalty, but all of their property would be destroyed. They would be put to death with the manner of execution of the sword, beheading, and all their property and all the property of the city would be destroyed. Nobody else would be permitted to benefit from that property. Their heirs would not receive that property because the city went bad, so to speak. An exception to this about the destruction of the property is what we're going to talk about today, is that if some of that property had been consecrated, right? So when you consecrate something, when you say, I'm going to take this property and donate it to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, or I'm going to give it for the upkeep of the temple, or I'm going to take this sheep of mine and consecrate it and say, this sheep is designated to be an offering that I'll bring to Jerusalem and offer on the altar there. So then it's no longer your property. Now it belongs to heaven, and so therefore it would not be destroyed in the conflagration of that idolatrous city when it is burned to the ground along with all its property. Of course, there are nuances to that law, what sort of consecration qualifies as consecration and what doesn't. We'll get a little bit into that. Okay, right at the top of page 112b, the Mishnah teaches, and the consecrated property in it must be redeemed, right? What I was just saying. We don't destroy the consecrated property. It belongs to heaven, so it must be redeemed. The sages taught in a baraisa, if there were offerings of the most sacred order in it, meaning if there were animals consecrated for sacrifice on the altar, they shall die. One causes their death. Items consecrated for temple maintenance must be redeemed, and terumos must be left to decay, and second tithe and sacred scrolls must be interred. So interesting, we don't burn it up in the fire of the destruction of that idolatrous city, but neither do we bring the offerings of the wicked up on the altar. We have to dispose of them in the designated way, in the correct way for disposing of sacred property that is for one reason or another disqualified and cannot be brought up on the altar. So there's a procedure for each of those. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that is not so. Rather, the term "its animals" from Deuteronomy 13:16 serves to exclude a firstborn animal and animal tithe, as they never belonged to the idolatrous city, right? The firstborn, let's say, of a ewe, right, a female sheep. So if the firstborn animal is a male, so it has already been dedicated to be brought as a bechor, a sacrifice of the firstborn. Maybe it can be redeemed, but it doesn't belong to its owner, right? So this serves. So therefore, it wasn't the property of the wicked. That means that's why it would be excluded. And then animal tithe, as they never belonged to an idolatrous city. The animal tithe. You have a flock of sheep, so then, in a season, you have a bunch of lambs. Okay, so the lambs pass under the staff of the shepherd, and he counts them, and the 10th lamb, that is the tithe that's going to have to be, designated and brought as some kind of an offering or donation, so therefore it never belonged to the owner, right? The tithe means it was set aside from its birth, and it only now gets counted, but it's like he never owned it. The Gemara proceeds to analyze the baraisa. The master said, if there were offerings of the most sacred order in it, if they were animals consecrated for sacrifice on the altar, they shall die, meaning they won't be brought as sacrifices, so they're just going to be left to die. The Gemara asks, but why shall they die? They should graze until they become unfit, and then they should be sold, and their value should be allocated for communal gift offerings. And Rabbi Yochanan says, they shall die, as it is written, the offering of the wicked is an abomination. Proverbs 21:27. And it is unacceptable for sacrifice on the altar. Reish Lakish says they shall die because the animal is the property of its owner and is not exclusively consecrated property. And the reason it is considered the property of the owner is that here the Tana is referring to offerings with regard to which one bears financial responsibility for their replacement. So this would be the distinction between, this is all when the temple is standing and offerings were being brought. We don't do this anymore and haven't for 2,000 years. We pray that when the third temple comes in with the coming of Mashiach, we'll be able to fulfill our obligations under the laws of offerings. We can't do this now. But when the temple was standing, or when the temple will be standing, if God restores the sacrificial process along with the temple, then let's say you say, I'm going to consecrate a sheep to bring it as an olah, right? As an elevation offering. It's something you just want to say, I love you, God. I just want to, dedicate something. I'm so grateful for everything that you have done for me. So the olah is an offering that is entirely consumed by the altar. Okay, so here's the difference. If you say, I'm going to bring a sheep as an olah, and this is the sheep. So then you have made a promise to bring a sheep as an offering, and you've designated this sheep to be the one that will fulfill your, promise to bring an offering. As opposed to, I will bring this sheep as an olah. That's the way you start the vow. So then, if this sheep, dies accidentally or something, okay, so then you weren't able to bring it as an elevation offering. Whereas in the case of the first vow, since you initially vowed to bring an olah and then designate this sheep in order to fulfill the vow that you first made, then if this sheep dies, you're going to have to replace it with another sheep. So that's the difference between an offering in which you are liable for its replacement and one in which you are not. In the case where you are liable for its replacement, it's considered to be still your property, as opposed to the second case where I say this sheep is consecrated to be brought as an olah. That sheep is no longer your property. You're responsible to bring it to Jerusalem, but it's no longer yours. In the case of the idolatrous city, where all the animals have to be destroyed that belong to the wicked, this would be an important distinction, because if it was consecrated, it wouldn't get destroyed in the conflagration. It would have a different outcome. And this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says an offering with regard to which one bears financial responsibility for its replacement is the property of its owner. The Gemara challenges from the fact that the latter clause of the Baraisas is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. One may infer that the first clause is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So the Gemara suggests a new explanation. Rather, the animals that shall die are offerings of lesser sanctity, and the ruling of the Baraisa is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei HaGalili, who says offerings of lesser sanctity are the property of their owner. And the Gemara infers, but offerings of the most sacred order, what shall be done with them? They shall be redeemed. And the Gemara asks, if so, rather than teaching in the latter clause of the Baraisa that items consecrated for temple maintenance, right, as opposed to I'm going to bring this sheep as an offering, you say I'm dedicating the value of this sheep to be a donation. I'm dedicating this sheep as a donation to the temple for temple upkeep. Right, so now you're going to bring that sheep, and what's the temple going to do? They're going to sell it and use that money for all the expenses of the Holy Temple, which was a large institution that had great need of those kinds of charitable contributions. So, if so, rather than teaching the latter clause of the Baraisa, items consecrated for temple maintenance must be redeemed, let the Tana distinguish and teach a distinction with the category of animals consecrated for sacrifice on the altar itself, as follows. In what case is this statement that animals shall die said? It is stated with regard to offerings of lesser sanctity, but with regard to offerings of the most sacred order, they shall be redeemed. And the Gemara answers, since there is among offerings of the most sacred order the case of the sin offering, whose owners were killed in the idolatrous city, rendering the animal a sin offering whose owners have died, right? So some kinds of offerings, if a person has a sin offering to bring, right, that would be the unwitting violation of a sin for whose intentional violation you're liable to excision, but you did it unintentionally, so then you can bring the sin offering. Okay, so that sin offering atones for you because you made this unintentional transgression. So what if the person designates the animal to be brought as a sin offering, but before he has a chance to go up to Jerusalem and bring the offering, he dies, natural causes or an accident or whatever. So he no longer needs atonement for his sin. He's died, right? So this is the normal thing. We're not talking necessarily. right now we're in the context of the wicked in the idolatrous city, a city that has been deemed idolatrous, and all its inhabitants, all the wicked inhabitants are going to be executed, and all their property has to be destroyed. But we're learning out a bunch of laws very specifically about their animals, if they've been consecrated or not. If they have been consecrated, what were they consecrated for? What offerings of the holy, what are they calling them? Of the highest order, the most sacred sanctity, Kaddish Kaddashim, would be like a sin offering. So we're saying, well, those get redeemed. They don't get destroyed. Okay, but let's learn out in the normal case of somebody who had an animal consecrated to be a sin offering and he died. He wasn't executed as part of an idolatrous city. He simply died. Then what happens to the sin offering? Okay, so since there is among the offerings of the most sacred order the case of the sin offering whose owners were killed in the idolatrous city, rendering the animal a sin offering whose owners have died, which is left to die, the distinction is not clear-cut for the Tana, as offerings of the most sacred order are not always redeemed. Therefore, the Tana preferred to cite a distinction without exceptions. And the Gemara comments, Rabbi Yochanan does not say his explanation of the Baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish, due to the fact that it is written, the offering of the wicked is an abomination. And he bases his explanation on that verse. But Reish Lakish, what is the reason he does not say his explanation of the Baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan? And the Gemara answers, he could have said to you that when we say the offering of the wicked is an abomination, this statement applies in a case where the offering is in its unadulterated form. But here, since if they were to redeem it, it would have changed and would no longer be the animal of the wicked itself, because it was redeemed, it was exchanged for money, and then the money becomes sacred, and the animal is no longer sacred. But rather, an animal purchased with the proceeds of the redemption of the original that is no longer, right, the animal that was the property of the wicked, and therefore it would no longer be an abomination, and therefore, according to this analysis, it could be redeemed. Now, the Baraisa continues. Rabbi Shimon says that the term its animals, again, a city has been rendered an idolatrous city, and so the animals of the wicked that are in the city have to be destroyed. The term its animals, so its animals, but the animals that belong to the wicked in the idolatrous city, this serves to exclude a firstborn animal and the animal tithe, because they never did belong to their owners, to the wicked of the city. The Gemara asks, what animals are we dealing with? If we say that Rabbi Shimon is speaking with regard to unblemished animals, meaning fit to be brought on the altar, as opposed to blemished animals, so like all other offerings, they are the spoils of heaven, and not the spoils of the inhabitants of the idolatrous city. So rather, Rabbi Shimon is speaking with regard to blemished animals. Blemished animals belong to their owners, right? Because they can't be brought on the altar. If you have an animal that develops a blemish, right? If you had vowed to bring an animal on the altar, and then you designate an animal to fulfill that vow, that animal develops a blemish. Okay, so now you have to replace that animal, or redeem it and then buy another animal, right? And the blemished animal cannot be brought on the altar. So if it's redeemed, it can go back to your herd. But there are cases where you can't redeem it, and so it would be left to die. But the point here is that blemished animals cannot be brought on the altar. They remain the property of their owner, at least according to, for the purposes of certain laws. In this case, it would remain the property of the owner. When the idolatrous city is burned, this animal would have to be included in that. So rather, Rabbi Shimon is speaking with regard to blemished animals, which belong to the owners. If so, they are the spoils of the city. And what is the reason that Rabbi Shimon says that there is no obligation to destroy these animals along with the idolatrous city? So Ravina says, actually, Rabbi Shimon is speaking with regard to blemished animals, and his statement should be understood as follows. The mitzvah is to destroy that which is eaten as its animals, i.e. the property of an inhabitant of an idolatrous city. Excluded are those firstborn and tithe animals, which even when blemished, are not eaten as the animals belonging to the inhabitants of that city. Rather, they are eaten as firstborn and tithe animals. They are given as gifts to Kohanim, to priests, and therefore they are considered the spoils of heaven, not the property of the residents of the idolatrous city. And this law disputes the statement of Shmuel, as Shmuel says, everything is sacrificed and everything is redeemed. And the Gemara asks, what is he saying? And the Gemara explains that this is what he is saying. Any offering that is sacrificed on the altar when it is unblemished and is redeemed when it is blemished, this is excluded from the term its spoils, since it is considered the spoils, the property of heaven. And the law concerning any offering that is sacrificed on the altar when it is unblemished and is not redeemed when it is blemished, for example, a firstborn animal and an animal tithe, this is derived from the term its animals, as they are not the city's animals, and therefore they are not included in the city's property that would have to be destroyed if the city were deemed, were convicted as an idolatrous city. Now the Baraisa continues, terumos, right? What's terumos? That's the first tithe that is given to the Kohanim from produce. Terumos must be left to decay. In other words, the terumos belonging to the residents of the idolatrous city, you're not going to give them to a priest and the priest eat them in a state of purity, because this was the property of the wicked. All right? Terumos must be left to decay. You can't sell it, you can't give it, no one can benefit from it, so we leave it to decay. Why don't we just burn it along with all the other produce of the city? Because it's terumos, right? Because it was consecrated as the property of heaven. The priest can't eat it because it came from the wicked, but neither does it get burned along with the rest of the property. So what do? We just let it decay. Rav Chisda says the sages taught this only with regard to teruma that is still in possession of an Israelite who has not yet given it to a priest. But concerning teruma that is already in the possession of a priest who lives in the idolatrous city, since it is his property, it shall be burned. It might have been given to him as teruma, but we're talking about a priest. We said that even the righteous who themselves are not killed, if their property is in this city, the idolatrous city, the city that is deemed an idolatrous city, that property is destroyed. So even if the priests were innocent of idolatry, his property, that's his property, but is in that city, would be destroyed along with it. Rav Yosef raised an objection from the Mishnah. Second tithe and sacred scrolls must be interred. Okay, different kinds of sacred property. Second tithe, Meiser Sheni. In the tithing process, first 2% goes to a priest that you can select as the owner of the property. Next 10% goes to a Levite. Again, you can select which Levite you want to give it to. Then the next 10% is second tithe. In the 7-year cycle, the Shemitah cycle, we actually still have the count. We know which years are Shemitah years. But at any rate, in the 7-year cycle, right, the 7th year, the farmers don't plant. There should have been so much food in the 6th year that there's plenty for them to eat in the 7th year. The 1st and 2nd years, and in the 4th and 5th years, that second 10% after the Levite tithe, this is the second tithe, and a person keeps it for himself, but he can only use that produce either to directly eat it or to fund his eating when he makes a pilgrimage for the festival in Jerusalem, whether it's Passover, Shavuos, or Sukkot. Second tithe is for him to eat, and be able to celebrate in Jerusalem. So it's consecrated for that purpose, even though he himself is going to consume it. Sacred scrolls are sacred scrolls, books of the Bible. Again, they have holiness. So we don't burn along with the property of the wicked, Meiser Sheni, and what are they called? Ketuvim? Vekisvei HaKodesh, right? So holy writings. Don't go up in the general conflagration, rather they are buried. Same like Torah scrolls, or tefillin, or mezuzahs, or sefarim, holy books, Bibles, and prayer books that are worn out. We don't burn them. We don't throw them in the trash. we store them until we have an opportunity to bury them in the ground. So likewise, sacred scrolls that belong to people in an idolatrous city. But isn't the status of Meiser Sheni in the possession of an Israelite like that of Teruma in the possession of a priest, as he may partake of it and benefit from it in Jerusalem? And nevertheless, it is taught that they must be interred? Why? Rather, if the statement of Rav Chisda was stated, this is what was stated. Rav Chisda says, the sages taught this only with regard to teruma that is already in the possession of a priest who lives in the idolatrous city, as even though it is his property, it maintains the sanctity of teruma. But teruma that is still in the possession of an Israelite, which is not his property at all, shall be given to a priest who is in another city and should not be left to decay. We learned in the Baraisa there, second tithe dough is exempt from having challah separated, since it is property belonging to the Most High. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis deem one liable to separate challah from second tithe dough. What is challah? Right, today we call challah, right, nice egg bread, or sometimes without eggs, water-based challah. Jewish bread, right? That we typically eat on Shabbos, at Shabbos dinner and Shabbos lunch. This Shabbos that begins tonight actually has a very particular tradition called the Schlissel challah, a challah formed in the shape of a key. Very interesting. We're going to be that's today, because we're going to be talking about the key of Elijah, and often people put a metal key actually in the challah. This is definitely not a commandment of any sort. It's a tradition. I believe it's a segula for Parnasa, that it should bring ample livelihood into the home, and all manner of blessings. People should be healthy, and have love and meaning and livelihood. But at any rate, what the word challah actually means, it's a type of offering that was practiced when the temple was standing, and that if you were baking bread and you were breaking a sufficient amount of bread, I think these days it's right, if you're using like 5 pounds of flour, I forget what the number is, but quite a bit of challah, quite a bit of bread. So then you're obligated to separate a piece of that challah, 1/24th for private individuals, or 1/48th for a baker, and give that to a Kohen, like teruma. But it's a particular kind of teruma. It's the challah that would be given to a priest. It's a piece of the bread dough. Now, today, when the temple is not standing and we are all ritually impure, so it's not possible for a priest to eat. We know who the Kohanim are, but they're not able to eat a challah in a state of purity. So what women do, it's typically women who do this, when they're making challah for the family, if they make enough challah, they separate just a small piece of the dough, they burn it, and then they set it aside. And then very often these are stored until the next Passover, when we burn the chametz. We're very often using these pieces of challah. That's what challah actually refers to. Okay, so the point is that challah is a type of consecrated property, and that's what we're talking about it here. If we're destroying all the property of the wicked in an idolatrous city, but not the consecrated property, so what about the challah? And the rabbis hold it is non-sacred property from which one is liable to separate challah, but with regard to second tithe dough in the outlying areas, everyone agrees that one is exempt from separating. Wait a minute, I'm not there yet. Let me just read this again. Yeah, I just went a little bit too fast for myself. Okay, we learned in the Baraisa there, second tithe dough is exempt from having challah separated, since it is property belonging to the Most High. Right? Second tithe has already been consecrated. So if you use second tithe dough, if you use second tithe grain to make bread, you won't have to take challah out of it, because it's not your bread. It's for your benefit that you're going to go up to Jerusalem and eat it there during the festival, but you don't have to separate challah from it. Okay. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. And the rabbis deem one liable to separate challah from second tithe dough, since it's still designated for your use. Rav Chisda says this dispute is with regard to second tithe in Jerusalem, right? If you brought it with you, as opposed to exchanging it for money and then putting the money in your hand to fund your eating while you're on that festival. If you actually brought the second tithe with you to Jerusalem, then do you have to take the challah or don't you? This dispute is with regard to second tithe in Jerusalem. As Rabbi Meir holds, second tithe produce is property belonging to the Most High. But the Torah permitted its owners to partake of it in Jerusalem when they went up for the festival. Since it is the property of heaven, one is exempt from separating priestly gifts, and challah is a priestly gift. And the rabbis hold it is non-sacred property from which one is liable to separate challah. But with regard to second tithe dough in the outlying areas, right, you're not allowed to eat it till you get to Jerusalem. If you redeem it, then it is deconsecrated and the money has that consecration on it. But if you bake it into challah before intending to eat it, but at the time that you're baking it, you're outside of Jerusalem, apparently you don't take the challah out of it for the priest, right? Second tithe dough in the outlying areas, meaning outside of Jerusalem, everyone agrees that one is exempt from separating challah, as outside of Jerusalem, it is prohibited to partake of it. Rav Yosef raises an objection from the Mishna. Second tithe and sacred scrolls must be interred. With what are we dealing? If we say that the reference is to second tithe in Jerusalem, can Jerusalem be an idolatrous city? Answer, no. Right? There are particular laws that apply to Jerusalem only, just making it distinguished from all the other cities in the land of Israel. One of those laws is that Jerusalem, even if more than half the residents who were Jewish were incited to commit idolatry, and there were witnesses, a pair of witnesses who gave forewarning to every case of that idolatry. Nonetheless, even if all those requirements, all those impossible requirements were met, but they were met in Jerusalem, still the city would not be deemed an idolatrous city, and it would never be burned to the ground for this purpose. Right? So that's why he's saying, what are we dealing with? If we say that the reference is to second tithe in Jerusalem, can Jerusalem be an idolatrous city? But isn't it Tana Baraisa? 10 matters were stated with regard to Jerusalem, and this is one of them. It does not become an idolatrous city. Rather, apparently, the reference is to second tithe in a different city that was rendered an idolatrous city, and before it was so rendered, one took the second tithe produce up into Jerusalem. And the Gemara asks, in that case, wasn't the produce admitted by the walls of Jerusalem, making it no longer associated with the idolatrous city, and it should therefore be permitted to partake of it? So rather, is the reference in the Mishnah not to second tithe produce in an outlying area. It's been removed from the idolatrous city, but it has not yet reached Jerusalem. And it is taught they must be interred, buried, not burned along with the property of the wicked in the idolatrous city. So apparently, second tithe produce is not the property of heaven. It belongs to the inhabitants of the idolatrous city. But the Gemara rejects this. No, actually the reference in the Mishnah is to second tithe produce in a different city. And before it was rendered an idolatrous city, one took the second tithe produce up into Jerusalem. And what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a case where the second tithe produce became ritually impure. Since it is prohibited to partake of it, Meiser Sheni, that has become Tameh, ritually impure, there is no alternative. We have to bury it. The Gemara challenges, but let him redeem it in Jerusalem. As Rabbi Elazar says, from where is it derived with regard to second tithe produce that became impure, that one may redeem it even in Jerusalem? As the verse states, and if the way is too long for you so that you are unable to carry it, se'eto, and you shall turn it into money. Deuteronomy 14, verses 24 and 25. And se'et means nothing other than eating, as it is stated, and he took portions, masot, from before him, Genesis 43:34, indicating that second tithe produce that cannot be eaten, whether due to the distance from Jerusalem or due to its impurity, may be redeemed. And the Gemara answers, what are we dealing with here? It is not a case where the second tithe produce became impure. So interesting that you can redeem impure Meiser Sheni, right? That means it's food that became impure. As Meiser Sheni, it cannot be eaten. But you can sell it exchange for money that deconsecrates the Meiser Sheni, consecrates the money. Now that money can only be used in Jerusalem, right, for your eating and drinking while you've made a pilgrimage festival. But the Meiser Sheni that you deconsecrated, now that's just chulin, regular food, right? Not sacred food. Can a regular Jew eat food that is tameh, that is in a state of ritual impurity? Yes. Who's obligated to eat foods when he himself and the food are both pure, tahor? Only a Kohen, only a priest, with regard to priestly gifts. It doesn't mean that he has to starve when he becomes impure. It's just that when he's in a state of impurity, like he came into contact with a creeping animal, or he assisted in a funeral, or somebody died, a close relative, or just somebody died and he touched the corpse by accident, so he's tameh. Doesn't mean he has to starve. Of course he can eat. He just can't eat teruma or challah or other priestly gifts that the food and the priest must both be in a state of purity. But if it's not a priestly gift, or if he's just an Israelite, a regular Jew, absolutely he can eat food that is tameh, that is impure. So you can redeem the Meiser Sheni, and there's a market for it because that food can be eaten. There's nothing wrong with it. And that's why we also have to keep in mind that this term ritual impurity, tuma, it's not like there's something wrong with the food. It came into contact with a source of ritual impurity. It's not cooties, it's not germs, it's not rot, it's not decay. It's just that we have to be so vigilant to keep things in a state of ritual purity if it's going to be a priestly gift, etc. Where was I? With what are we dealing with? Okay, now on page 113a, right at the top. Now the Gemara challenges, and let him redeem that which was purchased with second tithe money and became ritually impure. As we learned in a Mishna in Tractate Meiser Sheni, an item that is purchased with second tithe money that became ritually impure shall be redeemed. So the Gemara answers, right, you can't, because then it became impure, so it can't be eaten as consecrated food, so you redeem it. You exchange it for money. Then the money becomes consecrated. The food that became impure is now deconsecrated, and as non-sacred food, it can be eaten. An item that is purchased with second tithe money that became ritually impure shall be redeemed. Now the Gemara answers, the Mishna is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says an item that is purchased with second tithe money and that became ritually impure shall be buried, and it may no longer be redeemed. The Gemara asks, if so, and the Mishnah is referring to an item purchased with second tithe money that became ritually impure, why did the Mishnah cite this law specifically in the case of an idolatrous city? The same would hold true even in cities in general as well. As in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, the law there too is that the item is buried. Right? In other words, you purchased, you grew your produce on your farm, you separated Meiser Sheni, you're not gonna, and your farm grows watermelons, so you're not gonna carry 50 watermelons up to Jerusalem. You sell them. That's your Meiser Sheni. You turn it into money. Now that money from those 50 watermelons, okay, that's your Meiser Sheni. It's going to fund your eating when you go on the pilgrimage festival. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you get up to Jerusalem. Now you buy some food to eat while you're in Jerusalem with that Meiser Sheni money. Now that money gets deconsecrated. The person receives the money. It's just money. The food that you bought is consecrated as Meiser Sheni. It then becomes ritually impure. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't sell that ritually impure food because it's in Jerusalem. It was purchased with Meiser Sheni money. End of the line. Sounds like the other opinion, however, is, well, no, like any Meiser Sheni food that became impure, you can sell it. Then it can be eaten as non-sacred food. Now you've got consecrated money, and you can exchange that for food that then becomes consecrated. Rather, actually, the case in the Mishnah is with regard to pure second tithe produce of an idolatrous city that was taken into Jerusalem, and it is a case where the walls of Jerusalem then fell. And this law is in accordance with the opinion of Rava. As Rava says, the capacity of the wall of Jerusalem to enable one to partake of second tithe produce is by Torah law, right? Let's say, you had some dates that you grew on your palm tree at your house and said, oh, these are Meiser Sheni. I'm not going to sell them. I'm going to keep them in a state of purity. I'm going to eat them when I go up to Jerusalem for Passover. You keep them separated. They remain. They don't come into contact with any source of ritual impurity. And then you go on your pilgrimage up to Jerusalem. When can you eat them? How close to Jerusalem do you have to be? Apparently, when you enter the walls of Jerusalem. Now you can eat it. What if the walls of Jerusalem have fallen? Right? That's the question being asked. So the capacity of the wall of Jerusalem to enable one to partake of second tithe produce is by Torah law. By contrast, the capacity of the wall of Jerusalem to admit second tithe produce, in the sense that once it enters Jerusalem, the produce assumes the status of the property of the Most High and may no longer be redeemed, this is by rabbinic law. And the case where the sages issue the decree that entry into Jerusalem admits the produce is where the wall is intact. However, in a case where the wall is not intact, no, the sages did not issue a decree, and the second tithe remains the spoils of the idolatrous city. Right? All these laws of second tithe and what to do with it, we're analyzing in the context of Meiser Sheni that came from the residents of an idolatrous city. Okay, that was not an easy analysis. We're moving on. The Mishna, our Mishna, right, about idolatrous cities, the final Mishna in this chapter, also said, sacred scrolls must be interred. We've already referred to this a few times. Now we're looking at it more closely. Sacred scrolls that were the property of residents of the idolatrous city, right, they are sacred. Therefore, we don't burn them with the other property. We bury them. The Gemara comments, the law cited in the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. As it is taught in the Baraisa that Rabbi Eliezer says, any city in which there is even one mezuzah is not rendered an idolatrous city. Right? If there's even one mezuzah in the city, that city cannot become an idolatrous city. Further evidence that this never happened in the history of cities in the Holy Land. Imagine a city where there's not even one mezuzah. Could that be? And why would the presence of one mezuzah save the whole city from being deemed an idolatrous city? As it is stated, Deuteronomy 13:17, and you shall burn it with fire, both the city and all its spoils, entirely for the Lord your God. And in a city where there is a mezuzah, it is not possible to burn all of its spoils, as it is written, you shall not do so to the Lord your God, from Deuteronomy 12:4, from which it is derived that it is prohibited to destroy any item upon which the name of God appears. That's why we bury prayer books and Bibles, and we don't dispose of them any other way. They have the name of God written in them, so the only way to dispose of such sacred writings at the end of their useful life is to bury them. So according to this, right, the way that Rabbi Eliezer is reading it, if there's any sacred scrolls in that city, including a mezuzah, what's a mezuzah? It's not the mezuzah cover. The mezuzah is the scroll inside that has verses from the Torah in it that include God's name. And so therefore, if there are sacred scrolls in the city, even just one mezuzah, that city cannot be deemed an idolatrous city. Eliezer, instead of saying, okay, you're going to burn the city and all its spoils, but you have to separate out the sacred scrolls and bury those, Eliezer says, well, no, the sacred scrolls are part of the property of the residents. Since you can't burn them, you can't burn anything. You can't deem this city an idolatrous city. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Shimon says, the Holy One, blessed be he, says, if you implement judgment on an idolatrous city, I ascribe to you credit as though you have sacrificed an entirely burnt offering before me. And Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yosef HaGalili disagree as to whether one may convert the ruins of the idolatrous city into gardens and orchards. This we've already discussed. Why is it being brought here? It's a continuation of the Mishnah. So now we're looking at this part of it. So the Gemara posits, let us say that it is with regard to the statement that Rabbi Avin says, that Rabbi Ilya says, that these Tanaim, these sages of the Mishnah, disagree. As Rabbi Avin says that Rabbi Ilya says, anywhere that you find a generalization formulated as a positive commandment, something you must do, followed by a detail formulated as a prohibition, something you are prohibited to do, right? Positive commandment is thou shalt do such and such. Negative commandment or prohibition is thou shalt not do such and such. So anywhere you have a positive mitzvah followed by a detail that is a prohibition, one does not deduce from it that the generalization includes only the detail based on the hermeneutical principle of a generalization and a detail. Rather, one interprets them as two independent laws. Now, that's a hermeneutical principle that produces different outcomes depending on how you analyze a positive mitzvah followed by a negative mitzvah that seems to be related to it. Is it going to limit the cases in which the positive commandment applies, or are they separate laws? On that basis, say that the dispute is that one sage, Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, is of the opinion that the ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Avin, and the other sage, Rabbi Akiva, is of the opinion that the ruling is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Avin. What does that mean? Rabbi Yosef HaGalili holds that the positive mitzvah, and it shall be a heap forever. If a city was deemed an idolatrous city, more than half the residents, despite warning and with witnesses, committed idolatry after being incited by two adult males, and then you're going to execute all of the wicked and burn all the property, including burning all the houses and the walls and everything, right? You have to burn that idolatrous city down to the ground, and then it would stand as an example for all time to the remaining Jews of the nation that this is what happens when a city is subverted to idolatry. It will remain as an example, right? Just a heap. The point being, you can't rebuild there. Now, everyone agrees that you can't build another city in the spot where the idolatrous city stood and was burned to the ground. What they disagree about is whether you could build something there, like orchards and gardens, so you use the land for something, even if it's not a city, or if you have to just leave it like a burnt heap that eventually, I guess the wind would sweep away the ashes and it would just be a ruin, a nothing. So Rabbi Yosef HaGalili holds that the positive mitzvah, and it shall be a heap forever, which is followed by a prohibition, it shall not be built again. Right? So why did the Torah state both things? It shall be a heap forever, it shall not be built again. If it only said it shall be a heap forever, sounds like we would know you can't build another city there. Since the Torah adds, it shall not be built again, might that actually limit the restriction and allow us to build something there as long as it's not a city? That's what they're arguing about. Right, so according to Rabbi Yosef Galili, these are independent commandments. The result is that the city must remain a heap and it may not be converted into gardens or orchards. Rabbi Akiva applies the hermeneutical principle that when a negative prohibition follows a positive commandment, it limits the extent of the positive commandment. Therefore, it shall be a heap forever means only that it shall not be built again. The city shall not be built again. But something could be done on that land, namely gardens and orchards. Now, the Gemara rejects this. No, that's the improper analysis. Everyone is of the opinion that the ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Avin. And here what they disagree about is this. One sage, Rabbi Yosef Galili, holds that the term again indicates that it is entirely prohibited to rebuild it at all. And the other sage, Rabbi Akiva, holds that the term again indicates that it is not built to be as it was, a city, but it may be converted into gardens and orchards. They arrive there by a different process of analysis, but the same result. Rabbi Yosef Galili says, you leave it, you can never build anything there. Rabbi Akiva says, you could build gardens and orchards, you just can't build another city there. The sage is taught in a baraisa in a case where there were trees in the city. If they are detached from the ground, they are forbidden and must be burned as the spoils of an idolatrous city. If they are still attached to the ground, they are permitted, meaning they don't get destroyed with the rest of the property of the city. By contrast, trees of another city, whether detached or attached, are forbidden. So the Gemara is going to ask, what are you talking about? Of another city. This city was deemed an idolatrous city. So we're talking about whether trees are burned with all the property. So if they had already been cut down, it's lumber. It gets burned with all this stuff. If they're still attached to the ground, we don't burn it with all this stuff. Okay, why are you bringing trees of a different city? What does that mean? To what is the Baraisa referring with the phrase another city? Rav Chisda says this is a very specific meaning. It doesn't mean some other city. It means a specific city that was destroyed and had special rules attached to it. What was a city that was destroyed and had special laws attached to it? Jericho, right? Jericho, the first big conquest when Joshua led the children of Israel into the promised land, the siege and battle of Jericho, where they circled the city, 7 times, blowing shofars, and they brought the walls tumbling down. That story. Joshua chapter 6. What happened to Jericho that makes it special? To what is the Baraisa referring with the phrase another city? Rav Chisda says the reference is to Jericho, as it is written, and the city shall be devoted. Devoted in this case means not available to be built into a city that we, the children of Israel, will inhabit. This city was so steeped in idolatry that nothing can be built here. And the city shall be devoted, it and all that is in it, to the Lord. And Joshua charged him at that time by oath, saying, cursed be the man before the Lord that rises up to build this city Jericho. In other words, to rebuild. He shall lay its foundation with his firstborn, and with his youngest son shall he set up the gates of it. In other words, Joshua said, Jericho is now laid waste. God destroyed it on our behalf, and no city shall be built here. And any Jew that attempts to build a city here, he doesn't specify a Jew, but it seems to be a command for the Jewish people, right? So at least any Jew that tries to rebuild the city of Jericho in this spot, Joshua's curse is that his children will all die. Very heavy, very serious curse. It is taught in the Baraisa that this includes a prohibition not to build Jericho, even after changing its name to the name of another city, and not to build another city after giving it the name of Jericho. Very far-reaching curse that Joshua uttered. Not only can you not rebuild Jericho in that spot, you can't build another city and call it by a different name. You can't have a city in the place where Jericho stood. And you can't build a city somewhere else and name it Jericho. Bad things will happen. I know there are Jerichos in the world, so presumably they weren't founded by Jews. Not to build another city after giving it the name of Jericho, as it is written. It is taught in Baraisa that this includes a prohibition not to build Jericho, even after changing its name to the name of another city, and not to build another city after giving it the name of Jericho. How do we know? As it is written from 1 Kings 16:34. Hiel, the Bethelite, built Jericho. Somebody, forgot about Joshua's curse or simply ignored it. Hiel, the Bethelite, built Jericho. With Aviram, his firstborn, he laid its foundation, and with his youngest son, Seguv, set up its gates. In other words, this guy Hiel ignored the curse, built a city in the spot of Jericho, and his firstborn and his youngest died, just like Joshua said would happen. It is taught in the Baraisa from the death of Aviram, his firstborn, the wicked, that Aviram was wicked. It was not incumbent upon him to learn not to rebuild Jericho, since Aviram's death could be attributed to chance or to his own wickedness. But with the death of Segub, his youngest son, then it was incumbent upon him to learn that it was due to Joshua's curse that his sons had died. The Gemara asks, what did Abiram and Segub do that they are characterized as wicked? And what is the Baraisa saying? And the Gemara answers that this is what the Baraisa is saying. From the death of Aviram, his firstborn, that wicked man, Hiel, should have learned about the cause of death of Segub, his young son. By inference from that which is stated, with Aviram, his firstborn, do I not know that Segub was his youngest son? Rather, what is the meaning of the verse, his young son Segub? It teaches that he gradually buried all his sons from Aviram through Segub, and he should have suspected that Joshua's curse caused the deaths and given up on rebuilding Jericho. Ahab, right? King Ahab. Ahab was Hiel's close friend and groomsman at his wedding. He and Elijah, Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Elijah, came to inquire about Hiel's welfare in the house of mourning, Beit Tamya, right? So Hiel was mourning for his sons, and he received 2 visitors. I don't think they came together. Maybe they arrived at the same time. Who were they? Ahab, the king, the wicked King Ahab, who led the nation to do terrible acts of idolatry, and the holy prophet Elijah. Hiel sat and said, perhaps when Joshua cursed, this is what he cursed: not to build Jericho, even after changing its name to the name of another city, and not to build another city after giving it the name of Jericho. And Elijah said to him, yes, that is the curse. Ahab, right, King Ahab, said to Elijah, the curse of Moses is not fulfilled, as it is written, and you go astray and worship other gods. And it is written, and the Lord's anger will flare against you, and he will close the heavens, and there will be no rain. Right? So Ahab is saying, hey, Moses cursed us and said that if we perform idolatry in the land, there won't be any rain. But that hasn't happened. And that man, says Ahab, referring to himself, established an object of idol worship on each and every furrow in the kingdom of Israel, in the northern kingdom. And yet, the rain is so plentiful that it does not allow him to go and worship his idols. Will the curse of his student Joshua be fulfilled? Right? So Ahab's argument is, well, Moses made a curse and said that if we perform idolatry in the land of Israel, there won't be any rain. Well, King Ahab, have set up idols all over the place, and there's still so much rain that I can't even go worship my idols. So if Moses' curse was not fulfilled, you think Joshua's curse is going to be fulfilled? Now the verse relates Elijah, who's standing there listening to this conversation, how he reacts. Immediately, quote, and Elijah the Tishbite, right, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Elijah from Tishbe, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said to Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew or rain these years, except according to my word. 1 Kings 17:1. Elijah prayed for mercy, and they gave him the key to rainfall, enabling him to dictate when it would rain, and he arose and went. They, meaning heaven. Heaven gave Elijah the key. He was so angry that Ahab thought he could get away with this idolatry and not bring this curse of rain, that he prayed to heaven, maybe heaven is no longer punishing the people because the spiritual level of the people has fallen so far. But I want to raise it up again to where we're at the level that we'll be punished for our sins. Worse than being punished is being ignored, right? So Elijah says, have mercy on the land and treat us as people who are holy enough that when we sin, we'll be punished. And heaven said, okay. And here you can have the key to rain. So now that Elijah said there will be no more rain until the nation realized that it needs to repent and come back to God. And this was the beginning of a terrible drought and famine that Elijah caused, and only Elijah could end, right? And that finally ended, I think a few years later, when there was the incident of Elijah challenging all the priests of the Baal at Mount Carmel, and let's see whose God is real. And they danced and cut themselves for hours and brought no rain. And then Elijah brought one bull, and he had it soaked with water. And then he prayed to God, and fire came from heaven and consumed the bull. And all the nation knew that the Baal was a false god, and they returned with a full heart to God. It was an incredible incident. But that was at the end of this famine, which was triggered by this conversation in the house of mourning after Hiel buried his sons, because he ignored the curse of Joshua and rebuilt Jericho. It is written about Elijah, and the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Go from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by Wadi Cheres. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning during the time of the famine. And the Gemara asks, from where did they bring him bread and meat? And Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav says they brought it from the slaughterhouse of Ahab. And it is written, and it came to pass after some days that the wadi dried up because there was no rain in the land. Since God saw there is suffering in the world and Elijah was insensitive to it, he wouldn't end the famine since he had the key to rain. It is written, and the word of the Lord came to him, to Elijah, saying, Arise, go to Zarephath to initiate the chain of events that would lead Elijah to return the key to rainfall to God, meaning the incident that I just described when the rain finally came. And it is written, and it came to pass after these matters that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became sick. In 1 Kings 17:17. And Elijah prayed for mercy, for God to give him the key to the resurrection of the dead. Right? Let me keep reading. And they said to him from heaven, 3 keys were not typically passed to an agent. The key to a woman in childbirth, whether the child will live or not, whether the woman will live or not. The key to rainfall, and the key to the resurrection of the dead. You already have the key to rainfall. Do you also request the key to resurrect the dead? People will say 2 keys are in the possession of the student and only 1 key is in the possession of the master, meaning God. So bring me this key to rainfall and take this key to the resurrection of the dead. And due to Elijah's request, he was forced to revoke his oath, as it is written, Go, appear before Ahab, and I will give rain. Which is the beginning of that incident where he challenged those priests and said, it's enough, the famine's going to end. A certain Galilean taught before Rav Chisda, there is a parable for the actions of Elijah. To what is this matter comparable? It is comparable to a man who slammed his door and lost his key. Elijah first prevented the rain from falling, and then he no longer had possession of the key to enable it to fall again. Rabbi Yosef Sipori taught Father Elijah, which was a deferential and affectionate characterization for Elijah the prophet. And I'm almost done, so let's get ready, not only with questions, but for the Siyum. Rabbi Yosef Sipori taught that Father Elijah, a deferential and affectionate characterization for Elijah the prophet, was difficult. Right? He said Father Elijah was difficult. He's saying that endearingly, but you're saying that a prophet of God is difficult? Now, this is not just any prophet. This is Elijah, who never died. He ascended to heaven at the end of his earthly life, and because he never died, he's able to come back. And that's why, we have sages who are often visited by Elijah, and we open the door for Elijah at our Passover dinners. Hopefully he will herald the coming of Mashiach. And here in this case, Elijah was accustomed to coming and revealing himself before Rabbi Yosei each day. Rabbi Yosei lived many centuries after the life of Elijah, but Elijah came and visited him. He was obscured from him for 3 days and did not come. When he came again, Rabbi Yosei said to him, Why did the master not come? Elijah said to him, Because you denigrated me when you called me difficult. And Rabbi Yosei said to Elijah, Well, this example that is before us illustrates the point, as my master was being difficult by not coming during those days, indicating that Rabbi Yosei and Elijah had a pretty close type of friendship where he felt comfortable speaking in that manner. The Mishna teaches with regard to the verse, and there shall cleave nothing of that which was devoted to your hand, from Deuteronomy 13:18. As long as the wicked exist in the world, there is wrath in the world. And the Gemara asks, meaning God is angry when there are wicked people in the world. So the Gemara asks, who are these wicked people mentioned in the Mishnah? Rabbi Yosef said they are thieves. The sages taught in a Baraisa, when a wicked person comes into the world, wrath comes into the world. As it is stated, when the wicked comes into the world, contempt also comes, and with ignominy, reproach. Proverbs 18:3. When a wicked person is eliminated from the world, good comes into the world. As it is stated, and when the wicked perish, there is jubilation. Proverbs 11:10. When a righteous person passes from the world, evil comes into the world. As it is stated, the righteous perishes, and no man lays it to heart. And merciful men are taken. None understands that due to the evil, the righteous is taken. When a righteous person comes into the world, we're going to finish the tractate on a positive note. When a righteous person comes into the world, good comes into the world with him. As it is stated with regard to Noah, This is one who shall comfort us for our work and the toil of our hands. And with that, we finish the tractate. And now we read the hadran that we read at the end of every tractate when we make a Siyum. We shall return to you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and your glory is upon us. Our thoughts are upon you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and your thoughts are upon us. We will not be forgotten from you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and you will not be forgotten from us, neither in this world nor in the world to come. We repeat that paragraph 2 more times. We shall return to you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and your glory is upon us. Our thoughts are upon you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and your thoughts are upon us. We will not be forgotten from you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and you will not be forgotten from us, neither in this world nor in the world to come. We shall return to you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and your glory is upon us. Our thoughts are upon you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and your thoughts are upon us. We will not be forgotten from you, Tractate Sanhedrin, and you will not be forgotten from us, neither in this world nor in the world to come. May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, that your Torah will be our avocation in this world and will accompany us to the world to come. And then we list the sons of Bar Papa, all of whose sons were righteous sages: Chanina bar Papa, Ramai bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Abimari bar Papa, Rafram bar Papa, Rachish bar Papa, Surcha bar Papa, Ada bar Papa, Daru bar Papa. Please, Lord our God, make the words of our Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of your people, the house of Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of your people, the house of Israel, may all know your name and study your Torah for its own sake. Your commandments may be wiser than my enemies, for they are ever with me. Let my heart be undivided in your statutes, in order that I may not be put to shame. I will never forget your precepts, for with them you have quickened me. Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your statutes. Amen, amen, amen. Selah forever. We give thanks before you, Lord our God and God of our ancestors, that you have placed our lot among those who sit in the study hall, and that you have not given us our portion among those who sit idly on street corners. We rise early, and they rise early. We rise early to pursue matters of Torah, and they rise early to pursue frivolous matters. We toil, and they toil. We toil and receive a reward, and they toil and do not receive a reward. We run and they run. We run to the life of the world to come, and they run to the pit of destruction. As it is stated, but you, God, will bring them down into the pit of destruction. Men of blood and deceit shall not live out half their days. But as for me, I will trust in you. May it be your will, Lord my God, just as you have assisted me in completing Tractate Sanhedrin, so assist me to begin other tractates and books and conclude them, to learn and to teach, to observe and to perform and to fulfill all the teachings of your Torah with love. And may the merit of all the Tanaim and Amoraim and Torah scholars stand for me and my descendants, so that the Torah will not move from my mouth and from the mouths of my descendants and the descendants of my descendants forever. And may the verse, when you walk, it shall lead you. When you lie down, it shall watch over you. And when you awaken, it shall talk with you, be fulfilled in me. For in the Torah your days shall be multiplied, and the days of your life shall be increased. Length of days is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. May the Lord give strength to his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. And we say, Amen. Hello, honey. We're going to make a l'chaim together. Before we make a l'chaim, let us immediately, whenever we finish a tractate, we open the next one. Tractate Makos, and read the opening lines of Makos. Page 2a, Mishnah number 1. How are witnesses rendered conspiring witnesses? This applies in a case where two witnesses came before the court and said, we testify with regard to so-and-so, who is a priest, that he is the son of a divorced woman, or the son of a chalutza, a yevama who performed the rite of chalitza to free herself from the levirate bond. Those testimonies render him a halal, one disqualified from the priesthood due to flawed lineage. If a second set of witnesses testifies in court and renders the first set conspiring witnesses, one does not say with regard to each of the conspiring witnesses, the witness shall be rendered the son of a divorced woman or the son of a halutza in his stead. Rather, he receives 40 lashes as punishment for his false testimony. Okay.
Hello, everybody. We came to the end. I have to say, this tractate went really fast. Some of the tractates, I find myself thinking, are we still in this tractate? But Sanhedrin was just like greatest hits. It was so interesting, so much relevant to our lives now, all kinds of who's in the world to come, and going back through all the biblical characters and the troublemakers and the saintly characters who maybe there's more complexity there. Anyway, I was really fascinated by Sanhedrin. It's a great tractate, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. And it was great. The other day you changed the time of the class, and I was thinking, I wonder if people are going to be able to show up. And I see so many of the same familiar names, so that's great that you were able to adjust your schedule. And as you know, Sal's got so much going on right now with the movie coming out. But he always prioritizes AT Daily. If there's any way he can do the class, he will do the class.
And Nina has so much going on. All the stuff that I can't do, she's doing for Accidental Talmudist, with the Table for Five, with the weekly newsletter, which if you're not already subscribed, you really need to be. It's amazing. She's doing really amazing work on the weekly newsletter. And she's pulling the oar right now, getting ready our next script for our next movie, God willing. You'll be hearing about that in the future. I don't know how much we want to say about it at all.
It's a biblical thriller. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, you said something about the oars. So I'm deep in research about life in biblical times. And ChatGPT is actually really helping me a lot. So for one storyline, I said the following question to ChatGPT. If a merchant ship was coming into the Jaffa port in biblical times, how many oarsmen would there be?
Wow.
And I immediately get an answer. Well, there was either 12 or 20. So anyway, it's funny you said oarsmen. But yeah, I'm deep into learning about Phoenician boats and how long it takes to walk from Asher to Hebron. And I'm so excited about this project. So that's what I've been up to.
Absolutely amazing. And of course, I am hip deep or neck deep or way over my head deep, getting ready for the release of Guns N' Moses. Should be July 18th in theaters across America. And there's just so much work to be done between now and then. That includes, we're going up to Vancouver for the Vancouver Jewish Film Festival on Sunday, returning Monday, but not in time for class. So we'll have class tomorrow night, Saturday night, and then we'll resume with the first page of, the first page of Makos will be tomorrow night, and then we'll resume on Tuesday. So no class on Sunday and Monday. We'll put an announcement on that on the Facebook page as always. Let us make a l'chaim to the Siyum on Masechta Sanhedrin. May we remember some of the wonderful lessons that we learned in this tractate and never stop our studies.
Amen.
L'chaim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyavad b'ro.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol niyavad b'ro. Yum.
Yum. Sharon says, Elijah was very difficult, and he became very depressed and felt that the Jews were on a very wrong path, and he asked God to take his life. That's when he heard the still small voice in the wilderness that had God within it. And it is thought that that is why Elijah is supposed to come to witness every Brit Milah, every circumcision, and Havdalah observances and the Passover Seder to show him that we are still here and serve as an affirmation. That's beautiful, Sharon. Thank you. That's awesome.
I put comments in the document.
Very good. Okay.
I mean, there might
See,
be
Nina's
some
always
last-minute
inside,
ones.
and she passes me the comments. So and then I have to reload that document so that the comments come through, and that always takes a moment. I should have done that earlier. Here we go. Guy Guy. What if I have only 9 sheep? Wouldn't I be prudent to put aside the first one to guarantee that my obligation is met? We're talking about tithing animals. In other words, that all the lambs that are born in a particular year, the 10th, right, goes the 10th under the rod, becomes a tithe. What if you only have 9? I mean, then you're not obligated in tithing, right? But you're saying, I want to be saved. Maybe one is born that I wasn't aware of it, and I am obligated. Let me go up above and beyond. And I guess you could probably say something like, if I'm obligated in the tithe with this sheep, then let it serve as the tithe. If I'm not obligated, then let it be a free will offering or something like that. I'm sure there's more nuance to it than that. I'm just speaking off the top of my head, but I like what you're saying. Sharon, why would you need to buy sacred scrolls, even if it is an idolatrous city? I had been taught that a Torah scroll cannot become tameh. Or why would you bury, not buy? Why would you need to bury sacred scrolls, even in an idolatrous city? I had been taught that a Torah scroll cannot become tameh under any circumstances. Could the Torah scroll be transferred to another location? But it's not being buried because it's tameh. It's being buried because it's property of the wicked residents of an idolatrous city. They still own it, even though it's sacred. They own it, and since it's their property, it would be destroyed, but we can't burn it, so we bury it.
So we can't benefit from it. Is that the idea?
You can't benefit from any property of the idolatrous city, but it's not because it became tameh. Tameh is an issue, as we've been talking about, but I don't think in that issue.
It's like a Geniza situation.
Exactly. Geniza is where we await burial. Right? Michelle, these cities would be places of death and ruin. I can't imagine building there again. Yeah. Just so. And that's exactly the concept of the idolatrous city. It's supposed to stand as a reminder and a teachings of a visible mashal, a visible parable of what happens, when the people go bad and the city is burnt, and it should serve as a reminder for all time. Sharon says, but wasn't there a drought during Ahab's reign? Exactly. And that is what led to the sacrifices of Baal and Elijah to Hashem. So you must have said that before I got to it later in the class. And Tom, evil rulers bring disaster down on their people, the deserving and undeserving alike. Absolutely,
yeah,
right?
Ain't that the truth?
Ain't that the truth? Okay. So, that is awesome.
There might be a couple more that have come in. Yeah, definitely try to get used to refreshing, because sometimes last minute comments come in and I can't reach you, so it's good to refresh at the last moment. I don't know if anything else has come in.
Absolutely. Ilanit says, Shabbat Shalom from Silver Spring, Maryland. Be safe and grateful and keep the count. Right, we're counting the Omer in this period. Right, today is day 12, which we counted last night, in which we meditate on Hod Shebegavura, this aspect of the attribute of justice and restraint that leads to splendor. Right, if we can keep up improving ourselves in all the various aspects, we will glow with the splendor of people of faith who are working on themselves in their musar. And Ilani reflects on this chapter we just finished, on the Tractate we finished, that chapter 11 of Sanhedrin is amazing. Congrats to all who completed Tractate Sanhedrin. And Gordo says, thank you, Salanina, for this lesson and for all that you do. And thank you so much for being here, from tuning in from across well, not just the pond, the whole continent of North America.
And then the pond.
And then the pond.
Yeah.
It's so great to be learning with all of you. Very excited to get into the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, in chapter 2 of Makos that we begin tomorrow night. Okay. That's it. No one else further reflections. It's great to be learning with you. The hour is definitely late. So everybody should be blessed with a healthy, uplifting, refreshing, rejuvenating, peaceful Shabbos coming in tonight. Schlissel, the Schlissel Chala Shabbos. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow night when Shabbos ends in LA. We didn't do that the last 2 Shabboses because we were in Chag, right? Mm-hmm. We were in Passover. So what time's candlelighting tonight? Do you know offhand?
I think it's 7:13. I might be wrong though.
7:13. So Shabbos is going to end.
I'm not sure.
After 8. It's starting to get into that spring and summer season. So I will try to get on the air as early as I can, but sounds like it's probably going to be 8:30, 8:45 p.m. here in LA. So I'm always amazed and in awe of the East Coast people tuning in on Saturday night. All the best. Good Shabbos. Go ahead. Smile.